Quick FYI, if you didn't know, I have already made a video about depictions of death, so if it maybe feels like I'm skipping over something obvious or important towards the beginning of this video, it's probably because I've already said it in the other one. Also, be warned, if you do go and watch it, it's probably my strangest video. Actually, I take that back. My strangest video is the one where I try to convince a stranger to let me rob a grave in his backyard, but otherwise, you know, you get the point. Anyone who says they aren't afraid of death is full of shit. We're all afraid to die, and there's zero shame in that. But that being said, I realized the other day that I'm kinda over it. I'm not unafraid of dying. I still do not want to die, but I think I've finally gotten bored of worrying about it. I'm over the existential threat of my own death. I'm gonna die, we're all gonna die, except for Pancake. She's not allowed to die, but you know what? I think that it just is what it is. It's whatever. I'm over it. I'm done stressing about it. What I'm not done with, though, are depictions of death. Death personified, to be clear, like the Grim Reaper or the Angel of Death. I still think death as a character in art, media, fiction, that's redundant, they're all the same thing, but I still think death personified is sick as hell, and I want to talk about some more versions of him, or her, or them even, and I'm going to start with the Pillowman, from Martin McDonagh's 2003 play of the same name, but before I do so, I do need to give a quick spoiler and content warning. I've been wanting to talk about the Pillowman forever. It is my favorite play of all time. I think it is an incredibly powerful work of fiction, and you better believe I'm going to cover it here in its entirety, but it does play very fast and very loose with a handful of sensitive topics like self-harm, and much of the plot centers around characters taking their own lives. It is also a very violent play, and a lot of that violence is directed towards children. But I'm not going to show anything, and when we do get to some of those bits, my language will be deliberately vague. Still, if any of that is going to be an issue for you, no worries, this video is time-stamped, so you can either just skip to the next segment or dip, but either way, before you do so, feel more than free, feel encouraged to comment down below with your own favorite depiction of death, or maybe a portrayal or version that you think that I should check out. And if you do enjoy this video or anything else that I've been doing recently, also feel encouraged to like, subscribe, and share this video, and or to support me on Patreon, which not only gets you a very appreciative shout out at the end of every future video, but also grants you access to a growing library of exclusive shorter videos and whatever else I feel like posting on there. I was first introduced to the Pillowman by my high school theater teacher, who was a bit of a wild card. He was often very kind, funny, and cool, but also would very quickly and suddenly become quite angry, especially during one-act season. Rehearsals would often grow very tense, and if we were especially struggling to perform whatever scene the way he wanted us to, he would even throw things at us onto the stage. I never did get a chance to be in the Pillowman in high school. It was performed, I think, a year or two after I graduated, but I still return to the play and reread it probably once or twice a year. The Pillowman was written by Martin McDonagh, who I am a huge fan of, although best known as a filmmaker, and rightly so. In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, and The Banshees of Inisherin are all excellent movies, but his plays are just as good. The Cripple of Inishmaan and the Lieutenant of Inishmore are both very strange and funny. Most of his work on the stage comes in the form of sort of Irish folk tales written with a semi-modern twist. A lot of the dialogue and humor is very anachronistic, but they're all entertaining and unique, but The Pillowman is special. It isn't just his best play, but in my opinion, his best work, full stop. Although first performed in 2003, it was originally published in a limited capacity as early as 1999, and after garnering widespread attention and acclaim, would enjoy a fruitful 2004 awards season. The play would debut on Broadway the next year, featuring a stacked cast that included the likes of Billy Crudup, Michael Stuhlbarg, and Jeff Goldblum. And also the 2003 run had a great cast too, featuring both David Tennant and Jim Broadbent. I usually find it kind of cringy when stuff is pitched as being from the twisted mind of James Gunn, or the twisted minds behind Paddington 2. Or whatever, but if the Pillowman wanted to do that, it'd be accurate, and you should consider this your final warning before I raise the proverbial curtain on Couturian, who is being interrogated by a pair of policemen named Topolsky and Ariel. Couturian lives with and cares for his brother Michael, who, due to brain damage suffered at the hands of their evil parents, is intellectually disabled. When Couturian isn't working a dead-end job at a slaughterhouse, he is writing. Writing stories is his great passion. And for reasons unknown to him, the policemen have confiscated all of them, and now seem to be pinning a pair of recent child murders on him and his brother. By the way, the Pillowman takes place in a vague totalitarian state, the details of which aren't important to the story, but what does matter is that Topolsky and Ariel are able to act as violently as they please, and they do. Especially Ariel, who takes on the role of the bad cop. Ariel goes into the other room to torture Michael, while Topolsky reveals to Couturian that the two recently murdered children were each killed by methods described in his stories. In a story he wrote entitled The Little Appleman, a little girl who is being mistreated by her father makes him a set of little guys out of apples, and tells him not to eat them as long as he loves her. He, of course, eats them almost immediately, and dies, because the applemen were filled with razor blades. The first murdered child had similar applemen filled with razor blades stuffed down his throat. In a story entitled The Tale of the Town on the River, which takes place in the Irish town of Hamelin, a little boy's toes are cut off, which at first is a terrible thing. But when the Pied Piper shows up, the boy's limp saves him from being taken with the other children. The second murdered kid had his toes cut off, just like in the story, so Topolsky and Ariel actually have good reason to believe Couturian and his brother are responsible for the killings, except that they aren't. Couturian is able to see Michael while the policemen take their lunch, and Couturian recounts a story called The Little Green Pig to calm Michael down. In The Little Green Pig, a little green pig is proud to be different from all of the other pigs, who of course are pink, and very jealous of him. So they hold the little green pig down and paint him pink with permanent, impossible to remove paint, so now he's just like all of them. However, it's soon after, it rains a magical green rain, which makes all the pigs green, except for the little green pig, who is now the little pink pig, and once again different from all the other pigs. Michael then admits that he did actually murder the two children, trying to bring Couturian's stories to life. He also confesses that he has killed a third kid, a little girl, and buried her at their parents' home in accordance with the events of one of Couturian's stories, called The Little Jesus. In The Little Jesus, a little girl believes that she is Jesus Christ. Straight up. She starts preaching, wearing sandals, and dressing like Jesus. She even wears a little fake beard. Her evil step-parents hate this and decide to give her the full Jesus experience by crucifying her and burying her alive. Couturian is obviously very upset with all of this, and he fears that the policeman will kill him, kill Michael, and worst of all, to him, burn his stories. Michael then requests that Couturian tell him the story of the Pillowman. The titular Pillowman is entirely made out of pillows. He's got pillow hands and feet, teeth, and his head is a little round pillow, and he visits people who are on the verge of taking their own lives, travels back in time, and convinces their younger versions, them as children, to take their own life then, to avoid a lifetime's worth of suffering. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, that's really dark, I'll have you know that it gets worse. Because one day the Pillowman grows tired of his extremely depressing job and goes back in time to visit himself as a little pillow boy, who he convinces to light himself on fire. As the Pillow Boy, and by effect, the Pillowman, dies, he hears the screams and cries of all of those who he had convinced to die as children, now come back to life, doomed to live out their miserable lives. Couturier then smothers Michael to death, fittingly with a pillow, and he confesses to all of the murders. He tells Topolsky and Ariel that he killed all 3 children, his brother, too, obviously, and also his parents, who he killed after he discovered that they were abusing and torturing Michael. In exchange for his confession, he asks the policeman not to destroy his stories, and instead seal them away in their files for 50 years. The policeman realized that the little girl who had been little Jesus could still be alive, and Ariel exits and rushes to Couturier's parents' home. Meanwhile, Topolsky tells Couturier his own story, one that he has titled, The Story of the Little Deaf Boy on the Big Long Railroad Tracks in China, in which a wise, elderly mathematician saves a little deaf boy from being run over by a train. Ariel returns with the little girl, who is still alive and painted green. It turns out Michael didn't use her to reenact the little Jesus, but instead the little green pig. And she's perfectly fine, aside from being covered in green paint. This is great news to everyone except for Couturier, whose confession has been revealed to be bogus. As such, despite his pleas, the policemen tell him that they are, in fact, going to burn his stories and execute him. Topolsky puts a bag over Couturier's head and shoots him. And I really love the end of this play. I think it's just an absolutely beautiful ending, so I'm just gonna read it. In the 7 3/4 seconds he was given before he died, Couturier tried to think up a final story in lieu of a prayer for his brother. What he came up with was more of a footnote to a story, and the footnote was this. A happy, healthy little boy named Michael, on the eve of the night that his parents were to start torturing him for 7 consecutive years, was visited by a man made of all fluffy pillows and a big, smiley mouth. And the man sat with Michael and talked to him a while and told him about the horrific life he was to lead and where it was to end for him, with his only beloved brother smothering his life out on a cold prison floor. And the man suggested to Michael that wouldn't it be better if he did away with himself there and then and avoided all that horror. And Michael said, "But if I do away with myself, my brother will never get to hear me being tortured, will he?" "No," said the Pillowman. "But if my brother never gets to hear me being tortured, he may never write the stories he's going to write. Might he?" "That's true," said the Pillowman, and Michael thought about it a while and said, "Well, I think we should probably just keep things the way they are. Then with me being tortured and him hearing and all of that business, because I think I'm going to really like my brother's stories. I think I'm going to really like them." The story was going to finish in fashionably downbeat mode, with Michael going through all that torment with Couturier, writing all those stories only to have them burned from the world by a bulldog of a policeman. The story was going to finish that way, but was, of course, cut short by a bullet blowing his brains out 2 seconds too soon. And maybe it was best that the story didn't finish that way, as it wouldn't have been quite accurate. Because for reasons known only to himself, the bulldog of a policeman chose not to put the stories in the burning trash, but placed them carefully with Couturier's case file, which he then sealed away to remain unopened for 50-odd years. A fact which would have ruined the writer's fashionably downbeat ending, but was somehow more in keeping with the spirit of the thing. Of the many things I love about this play, the story of the Pillowman is easily one of my favorite parts. The Pillowman, of course, functions as a sort of reaper. He's not literally death themselves, but he's a version of that. And despite the inherent cruelty of his gruesome task, he is sort of benevolent, which is something that Topolsky actually points out. There was something about the Pillowman that stayed with me. There was something gentle about it. And the idea of if a child died alone through some accident, he wasn't really alone. He had this kind, soft person with him to hold his hand and whatnot. And that it was the child's choice, somehow, made it somewhat reassuring, somehow. That it wasn't just a stupid waste. Like, I'm pretty sure I've made abundantly clear by this point, I adore this play, but it's not perfect. Like, I don't think Michael's motivations behind his crimes that he's committed are very well fleshed out at all. But I love all the rest. I love Couturian's stories. They're all fables, and like most of the classics' original texts, are dark and macabre, as is the entire play in general, but it still finds ways to be hopeful and empathetic. While I don't believe in the Pillowman, the character, to be clear, with his philosophy, I don't think a theoretically miserable life just isn't worth living. And, you know, you never know what tomorrow will bring, or when better days will come. I have to believe that, for my own sake, really. That's a worldview that I cling to, but as far as versions of death or the Grim Reaper go, I do agree with Topolsky. There is something gentle about him, and, you know, if the Pillowman appeared to me today and made his offer, I do hope that I would turn him down. Like many of y'all, probably, I first read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight as part of my high school English curriculum. My teacher actually could recite a good chunk of the poem in Middle English, and he thought that was very cool. And you know what? He was right. Written sometime towards the end of the 14th century by an unknown author typically referred to as the Gawain poet, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is one of the most famous pieces of Arthurian fiction, and considering the fact that there was a feature-length film adaptation made just 4 years ago, one of its most enduring. Unfortunately, I had a really bad theater experience when my wife and I went and saw it in 2021. The theater had some kind of projection issue, which made the screen extremely dark, so for large portions of the movie, we literally couldn't see it all, like anything that was happening. and our audience was also annoying, and it was just an all-around shitty experience that definitely influenced our enjoyment of the film, so I was very due for a rewatch. And unsurprisingly, I liked it a lot more when I watched it this past week, although I still couldn't see a lot of what was happening. It turns out much of the film is just kind of lit like that. Dev Patel is really good as Sir Gawain, aka Sir Gawain per the Middle English pronunciation. Sean Harris is actually also quite good as an older King Arthur, and Ralph Ineson in his limited screen time is imposing and impactful as the Green Knight, who primarily functions as a symbol and stand-in for death, much more so in the film than in that original chivalric romance poem. To be clear, there he is primarily symbolic of nature. I mean, obviously, right? He's literally green. But also the supernatural, and he teaches Gawain a chivalric lesson about honor and honesty, which is all also true of the film. It is an impressively faithful adaptation that also just so happens to be completely obsessed with death. start to finish, from the opening setup to the ending sequence, which are both, by the way, absolutely riveting. Gawain is actually a bit of a knucklehead in this movie, and he's partying his way towards knighthood. When his mother, aka Morgan Le Fay, aka Arthur's sister, conjures up the Green Knight to teach him an important lesson about life and death. Normal parenting 101 type stuff. The Green Knight shows up and lets Gawain lop his head off in exchange for being given the opportunity to return the favor in a year's time, and while to many this is just another crazy thing to sing songs about and mythologize, to Gawain this is a grim ultimatum. This is him meeting his Reaper and learning directly from the source that he is going to die soon, and his adventure en route to his rendezvous with the Green Knight is treated basically as a funeral march in which he is constantly faced with reminders of his own impending doom. He is, however, given a magical green belt that is promised to protect him from death, but even so, when he does finally make it to the Green Knight, he finds himself too frightened to uphold his end of the bargain, and he runs away, like Cinderella from the ball. We then see the rest of his life play out. His side piece gives birth, he marries a princess, he becomes a Machiavellian ruler who leads his kingdom into war before he is killed, and then in the blink of an eye, we are back at our scheduled meetup with the Green Knight, waiting for him to strike. This whole ending sequence is just awesome. By the way, by far the best part of the film. Gawain stops the Green Knight from landing his blow and first takes off the magical belt. This is him accepting his fate with honor, having made peace with death, whose challenge he has now successfully passed. The Green Knight then smiles and congratulates him on passing his test before saying in jest,
"Off with your head."
I love the Green Knight's makeup. By the way, he looks really cool. Poor Ralph Ineson had to sit in the makeup chair for 3.5 hours every morning of filming, having all those prosthetics stuck on him, which he referred to as his cocoon. But you know what? It was all well worth it. Also, it was recently announced that the hit from Soft game Elden Ring would be receiving a film adaptation to be directed by Alex Garland. And I don't know if maybe he was unavailable or uninterested for whatever reason, but it's a bit of a shame, in my opinion, that David Lowery won't be in the director's chair for it, because I think he nailed Elden Ring's style of like minimalist mysticism in The Green Knight. But, you know, who knows? There is also a really neat little moment early on in the film where the Green Knight sets his axe down and moss starts growing on the ground around it. Love that. He is just as much representative of life as death, but you know, they go hand in hand for all of us and every living thing, again, except for Pancake, who is forever forbidden from dying. Thank y'all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video even just half as much as I did making it. I had a lot of fun putting this one together. Aside from all the aforementioned stuff down below, like my Patreon link and also my Letterboxd is linked there too, and all that, but there's also a link to a short story that I recently wrote, which I was pretty happy with if you want to check that out too. But aside from that, I want to thank all of my patrons and channel members for their continued support. Drew K, Martha Barnett, Addison S, Sean C, Curbing, Lance B, Totally Awesome, Muffin, Nina Vergoski, Joy Barnett, Braden Surfos, Jay Is Ite, Ethan, Katie LaBombard, Ubaba, Alex, BAAM, Brandon, Avi, Biggest Brickus, Cooper Jones, Barbecutie, Levi Barnett, Aces 1290, and Knoll Productions.